No, the transgender ideology stuff is not a mountain out of a molehill. It's basically a molehill that people are just fixated on. I know that it's a very small issue, but I would view it in the same way as I view flat Earth. If I knew somebody believed in flat Earth, that would completely disqualify them, in my mind, from being a decision maker for anything else. Because their decision-making faculties have been compromised. Destroy them completely. Destroy everything about them. And I think transgender is another good example of that, especially whenever it comes to minors and it comes to sports. Mayors in jail, put the governors up on the Insurrection Act for sedition, put all the people that were doing the shit in front of the detention centers, put them in mandatory prison labor camps. Any of them that are violent, authorize the police officers to respond with violence to them, immediately, completely shut it down. This person is this delusional that they think this thing that is so far removed from reality that it provides a frame of reference that this person cannot be allowed to operate and be expected to operate as a rational actor. It's illogical. It's completely illogical. That's the reason why the transgender issue matters so much. Bring in the military if you need to. Bring in the National Guard. Do whatever you need to do. Look and find out who's funding this. Take those people, charge them with incitement for terrorism, put them in Guantanamo Bay. Like, I'm talking about scorched earth, Old Testament. Get them the fuck out. It's like people who believe the earth is 6,000 years old, or people that believe it's flat, or people that believe that there's like lizards living in the center of the earth and they're the ones controlling everybody here. Like, these ideals are just so batshit crazy stupid that they provide a frame of reference that disqualifies that type of a person from having the opinion on anything else.
I think they should use actual ammo, and if anybody throws a rock or tries to harm one of the police officers, I think they should just use deadly force to stop it from happening. There's no reason why anybody should be putting up with that, and it's disgusting, honestly, that there's so many people that are okay with it. Yeah, shoot on sight? Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Set an example? Yeah.
I want to help those kids become the person they are, and I want to tell the parents that they should still love them no matter what.
Have you ever seen a happy, thriving child walking and smiling with their friends on the way back to their parents' house? A happy child that for years was in distress, that battled with crushing depression and dread, but is finally free and content. And you thought, wow, this is just like flat Earth. This child should hate themselves again. I am very smart.
These people are not your allies. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture that is horrible. It people for their identity, and it is directly antithetical to everything Western values stand for, and it is an inferior culture in all ways.
If this sounds like you, then you might be, well, let's be honest, you might be a lot of people. It's not exactly hard to find rabid transphobes these days, offline and especially online. Thanks Elon Musk for that one, by the way. But you might also be the subject of this video. Famed blood wall haver, dead rat alarm clock user, and cockroach climbing wall made flesh, Zach Raw, or as most know him, Asmongold. As a rule on this channel, I try not to come after the same creator twice. That rule obviously doesn't apply to politicians and people like Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling, you know, literal billionaires with actual power using their influence to make the world a worse place for millions of people. But for creators, I think usually once I've ragged on someone, it's time to move on. However, have you seen the shit Asmongold been saying about trans people recently?
And so we think
they should not be teaching transgenderism in anything other than maybe the last year of high school. Children should not be getting exposed to transgender ideology. It's like people who believe the Earth is 6,000 years old, or people that believe it's flat, or people that believe that there's like lizards living in the center of the Earth and they're the ones controlling everybody here. Like, these ideals are just so batshit crazy stupid that they provide a frame of reference that disqualifies that type of a person from having the opinion on anything else.
Clearly, it wasn't enough to accuse trans creators of being nonces.
We have a person here who is a big fan, very big fan of giving children puberty blockers.
Forcing trans kids to go through a puberty that doesn't align with their gender identity and causes them to have depression, anxiety, and a high risk of just because you believe that trans people shouldn't be allowed to exist is bad, actually. It admits children should take anabolic steroids if they are groomed through Munchausen by proxy. Like, the level of transphobia in this statement. HRT, they're not anabolic steroids. And you cannot groom a cis kid to become trans. Trans kids exist.
It wasn't enough to deny the by erasing the very real persecution of trans people and the destruction of queer science, literature, and culture by the Nazis.
They burned them not because it was gender stuff, but because it was written in Jewish and not German. And it was like a retaking of Germany for Germans. That was like the uprising of the Nazis.
Because no one can stop ragging on any of us for even a second. Now, Asmongold is saying believing trans people are real is inherently illogical. That people who do believe trans people are real are mentally impaired. That transgender ideology should not be taught in schools. That kids cannot be exposed to transgender ideology. And he is comparing acknowledging the existence of trans kids to being a flat earther, to believing in young earth creationism, and to believing in lizard people. Now, if you just heard the anti-Semitism alarm go off, do not adjust your TV sets. I mean, phones. Because we will get to lizard people. How throwing that out there, along with this man's history of Nile, references to Anders Breivik, and thinking that is okay in some instances, well, it doesn't exactly paint a bright picture of our cockroach king. For now, though, I'm going to go over how this comparison is incredibly wrong and incredibly harmful. Are trans kids like lizard people or flat earth? Well, if we look at the science behind all three of these claims, one is backed by years of empirical evidence pointing to positive outcomes for trans kids receiving healthcare. By the end, there's records of trans kids who went on to transition as adults, thus proving that this healthcare was reaching the right people, along with the astonishingly low regret rates for trans healthcare compared to practically every other healthcare pathway we know of. Seriously, the regret rates for, say, gender-affirming surgeries are lower than that of knee surgery. Trans surgeries, which trans kids do not get, by the way, unless at least in their late teens, and that's only if they've been out their whole life and go through more hoops than the entire country of Britain eats on their toast. That's a joke for all the Brits in the audience. I know you're there. I've seen my demographics. The other two? Well, let's check in my magic science sack, shall we, and look for the evidence of a flat earth, of young earth creationism, and of lizard people. Oh wow! This sack is empty! Just like my sack after... Good evening, good morning, and / or good night. No, wait, let's scratch that one, I'm not going anywhere. In fact, I'm just getting started. You see, it's me, Bridget Empire, science and culture correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, the only newspaper in Britain whose editors don't use dead rats as alarm clocks. That's right, while the rest of Fleet Street drinks the blood and partakes of the flesh of our friends in the sewer, the Daily Telegraph staff proudly subsist on a balanced diet of human souls and sweet, sweet Patreon subs. So keep those coming in, or Dan here will become untethered from what's left of his body and be forced to live in hell, with Margaret Thatcher, Jimmy Savile, and Asmongold's dignity. For just £1 a month, you can sponsor a poor British Draugr and keep a roof over his head. And also, me. You can sponsor me. Today, the fruits of your donations are this! A video about how trans people are real, actually. In fact, believing that they are is logical. Because we exist. I'm right in front of you now. And how lizard people, young Earth creationism, and flat Earth are not. And why comparing them to each other is 1, bananas, and 2, evil, and 3, reveals a lot about Asmongold himself and how he thinks. But first, a quick refresher on the subject of today's video and how the hell we got here.
Society would instantly and dramatically improve if we took the bottom 5 to 10% most working kids out of school and put them in the coal mines instead. Almost all Western cultural problems are derived from adherence to the false god of equality.
Asmongold, real name Zach Hoyt, is the biggest political streamer on the biggest streaming platform on the planet. As the Tucker Carlson of Twitch, both in temperament and in popularity and in levels of horror I am in at the fact that they continue to be so popular while spitting so much venom, Asmongold exists to sit in his unclean flat, not showering or brushing his 3 remaining teeth, living among dead rats and cockroaches, and calling for the extrajudicial murder of immigrants and protesters, and calling Donald Trump based! But it wasn't always this way. He was once a humble World of Warcraft streamer. Before he may or may not have dated a child, or named his World of Warcraft character after a Norwegian mass murderer, he was just a little guy. But bad guys don't stay just little guys forever. And in recent years, he has shifted more and more towards being a dedicated politics streamer. And his political views are, well, from what I've seen, if Trump, for example, detonated a nuclear bomb over Los Angeles because it's got too many brown people in it, he would watch the video silently and just say, "Good. Fuck around and find out. Based." If that sounds harsh, maybe you should watch a bit of his content. In fact, here's an extremely short lowlight reel, just to get a taste of what we're dealing with as a society, with this man as one of the biggest voices in the online politics sphere.
If somebody gets negatively affected or somebody harasses them, that's just not my problem. Cases, I've done it before. It's happened, I think, twice. One time, I had a girlfriend move in, and she said you needed to change your pillowcases, and that was in 2019. And then the other time I changed them was in 2023. And so, yeah, it's happened. There's a roach flying at me. Give me a minute. Where'd he go? Oh, shit! He's on my belly. Look at him. He's right there. Oh, God. Get him out of me.
What are you doing, bro? Get out of my... Go in the garbage cans. I'm gonna take him downstairs. Give me a minute. I got him. He right? I can't
Don't show this one to Izzy. I'm not going to cry a fucking river when people who that's baked into their laws are getting. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture, and it is directly antithetical to everything Western values stand for, and it is an inferior culture in all ways. Oh, what a nice guy. And so that's it. America is not white people's land. That's Europe. Well, it is. It absolutely is white people's land. We fought a war over it. Duh, it got conquered. What? Absolutely it is. It's been our land for hundreds of years. Of course. Obviously. It got conquered, yes.
And then, precisely at noon, the sun would shine directly down into the water of the well. There lived a man named Eratosthenes.
In the Greek colony of Syene, in modern-day Libya, 2,000 years before Asmongold would compare the likelihood of the existence of trans people to a flat Earth, a man history knows only as Eratosthenes calculated the size of the Earth using technology as simple as a wooden pole. I don't actually know what material the poles were made from, but just go with me here. Eratosthenes, however, had no problem coming to terms with the fact he was measuring the circumference of the Earth, nor the distance from the Earth to the Moon and the Sun, because he, unlike some people today, like most people of his time, knew that the Earth was spherical. How, might you ask? If you find such a thing hard to believe? Why, for multiple reasons. Reasons you can observe yourself if you don't spend all day sitting in the dark with dead rats and cockroaches, such as the fact that you can see ships disappear over the horizon while their masts remain visible. And perhaps less intuitively to those of us who don't see the sky as the ancient Greeks did because of light pollution, because of astronomical phenomena, such as the changing position of stars in the sky and the curved shadow of the Earth on the moon during the eclipse. What Eratosthenes did to predict with incredible accuracy this fascinating factoid was two things. First, he observed at noon in the summer solstice that the sun shone directly into a famous well in the city of Syene, in Egypt, lighting just the bottom of the well and not the sides. So the sun was directly overhead. Then, placing a pole in Alexandria, watching as noon on the summer solstice came and the pole still cast a shadow. The sun was comparatively slightly to the south. Eratosthenes, knowing roughly the distance between Syene and Alexandria, could then calculate the curvature of the very planet he was standing on. By dividing the length of the pole's shadow by the height of the pole, he measured the angle of the sun's rays. Assuming the Earth was a sphere, he divided 360 degrees by that angle, which would give the circumference of the Earth divided by the distance between Syene and Alexandria. Now we know now that the Earth is not a sphere technically, but an oblate spheroid, so the calculation wasn't perfect, but it was damn close. None of this would work at all if the Earth was flat. Neither would the ability of people to circumnavigate the Earth, nor the patterns of weather systems and ocean currents work the way we observe them doing, going all around the Earth from continent to continent and influencing each other. In addition, no one has ever fallen off the edge of the Earth. We certainly would have heard about that if we still have stories of some dude from 2,000 years ago doing this stuff. And the excuse that there's a giant ice wall around the Earth is no excuse given we have loads of stories of Antarctic and Arctic explorers. And on top of all of that, people have been to the moon. People have been into space. They've looked back at Earth and taken photographs of the Earth from space, and you can see its shape and the fact that not all continents are visible at once, and how, over time, the parts of the Earth you can see from space change as the Earth rotates. Like most conspiracy theories this large, you have to take more and more elements into it to explain how it still makes sense. In this instance, to believe in a flat Earth, you also need to be a moon landings truther.
Would you like to yell at the moon with Buzz Aldrin?
So, according to Asmongold, trans people cannot possibly have this same level of science behind them. We cannot observe them, or predict things involving them, and have the predictions appear accurate. But I am trans and I'm here. I was a trans kid. I know trans people who've played sports even at a semi-professional level. We have done studies on and including trans people. And unfortunately for Asmongold, we know that there are flat earthers out there, people that deny the very evidence of their eyes and the thousands of years of observations and science proving the earth is round. How does Asmongold know that he's not one of these people, but for trans people, rather than the other way around? Because that's exactly what he is. How does he insist that the Earth is round, but trans people don't exist, when both are backed up by observation and by the accumulation of science? What is it about trans people he doesn't believe exists? Does he realise that he's doing the equivalent of saying that round Earth shouldn't be talked about in schools?
But the basic concept is sound. Absolutely sound. And one thing, again, we absolutely know for a fact, this ain't it.
For people who believe in flat Earth, proof of the Earth's roundness is something to be hand-waved away. When the sun sets in Norway, and they call up their friend in Morocco to find the sun is still up there, that doesn't shake their beliefs, despite that being impossible if the Earth is flat. Maybe their Moroccan friend is lying. Maybe the CIA put a fake sun up to fool everyone south of the Arctic Circle. If they flew around the world, following the path of the sun, and saw the curvature of the Earth, and the sun setting slower than they would expect in real time as they're following its path, it would do nothing for them. This, I have to assume, is what Asmongold thinks trans people are like. Any evidence that goes against us is hand-waved away, and all evidence for us is easily debunked by anyone with actual scientific aptitude, or as he would call it, logic. Personally, I think if he were a man of logic, he would have stopped having Wendy's every day and started brushing his teeth before he only had 3 left, but that's besides the point. Because there is evidence that trans people, hell, if you want to look at the extreme stuff he's most terrified of, trans kids, ooh, exist. I'll show you some now. Also, as a person of logic myself, someone with a science PhD, I'm sure Asmongold will listen to me, and not completely ignore me because I am trans.
Get the dead rat out? I don't need to anymore, it doesn't smell bad.
If this evidence is obvious bunk, and if I would dismiss evidence against it without any real consideration, then I guess I'm the same as a flat earther. So, let's look at 2 studies about trans kids. One for, and one of the most notorious ones against, championed by transphobes and conservatives as one of the smoking guns backing up the bigotry in logic.
Round 1, fight!
So first, to the boogeyman. Transgender kids who were supported in their transition by their parents, something Asmongold compares to belief in a flat earth, young earth creationism, and lizard people. Let's look at a study on outcomes of children growing up, identifying as trans, and being recognised as such by their caregivers and the medical community administrating their care. If Asmongold is right, supporting kids such as these in their transition should completely mess them up. But, according to the journal Pediatrics, in a study called Mental Health of Transgender Children Who Are Supported in Their Identities from 2016, so almost a decade old, with 1,367 citations, so well established, peer-reviewed, built on afterwards, and not at all a newfangled study thrown together at the last minute to try and fumble together a bunch of nothings into what looks like something, as all flat earth evidence is. Well, according to this study, the trans kids in the study were not completely messed up by transitioning. In fact, the very opposite was true.
It's not us putting it on our child. She's coming to me saying, I want to be a girl. How do I become one?
This study followed 73 trans children, along with 73 non-trans children as a control group, and 49 siblings of trans kids who obviously grew up with the same parents and environment as the trans kids, just to see if the environment had anything to do with it. The transgender children were found to have similar levels of depression relative to the general population, and only slightly higher levels of anxiety. Compared to trans kids who don't transition before adulthood, they had significantly lower levels of anxiety and depression. Almost as if being trans and not getting treatment results in horrible depression, and almost as if transitioning works to alleviate this, something I can attest to as a trans person who did not transition until my mid to late 20s. The slight rise in anxiety in these trans kids was, as other studies such as the 2023 study from the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health put it, mainly attributable to the societal gender pressure to conform to their assigned gender. Or, in words someone like Asmongold would understand, when you stigmatise trans kids by, say, comparing their existence to flat earth or lizard people, and saying that they are the result of extremists and an existential crisis facing the West, it might make them a little bit, anxious. Almost as if the whole global conservative movement is constantly telling them they're out to get them or something. Frankly, the fact that their mental health outcomes are as good as they are is a testament to how effective transition is at improving mental health. Even in this second study I mentioned, where mental health outcomes were less positive, and where it was found that this was due to societal transphobia and pressure to conform to cisgender gender roles, it was found that the mental health resilience of transgender kids is notably high compared to the general population. And if we go back to the original study, find it on Google Scholar, and click on that little cited by 1,367 link underneath its title, you will see a metric shitload of articles studying the mental health of transgender children and transgender people in general, and the demonstrable ways in which transition is a proven and effective treatment for children who, but those children themselves will certainly tell you, they identify as transgender, and the outcomes of gender-affirming care on these children, as backed up by these over 1,000 studies, certainly suggest that they are correct, and that you are 1. Wrong, and 2. Smell bad.
That entire room was a shithole, okay? It was huge. And anyway, what happened is that a rat got in there and it died. And so I was like, man, this smells really bad. We've got to deal with this problem with the dead rat in that room. So I closed the door. And that was pretty much about it.
But that's just one side of the flat earth comparison taken care of. What about the way that flat earthers deny evidence? Well, let's look at one of the most famous and championed anti-transgender studies ever made. One that gender-critical people think is the strongest weapon in their arsenal. And see if reading it owns me so hard that it turns me into a corn cob. Shall we?
So, rapid onset gender dysphoria is a fake concept that basically claims that being transgender is a social contagion and can be caused by social influence among friendship groups. It's not a real thing. It's been rejected by medical bodies. It's not an accepted term. The researcher who coined the term rapid onset gender dysphoria came up with the term after she surveyed the parents of transgender kids, and she recruited these parents for the survey primarily from transphobic websites.
In 2018, Lisa Littman published her landmark study, Parent Reports of Adolescents and Young Adults Perceived to Show Signs of a Rapid Onset of Gender Dysphoria in PLOS One. Or at least that's what it's called now. Now, given my own past record with publications, I won't rag on Littman too hard for publishing this paper alone. I have done so myself before. However, for a medical study with the impact this paper has had in spreading anti-trans narratives and inciting a moral panic, you would expect a collaboration with at least one notable medical institution, with associated professionals co-authoring to lend legitimacy to what is, in this paper, a rather striking claim. Namely, that there exists a new and terrifying disease affecting our precious children. Society is convincing children out of nowhere that they are transgender, and it's going to destroy an entire generation. This, woke mind virus, if you will, is called Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria, or ROGD. Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria was championed for several years by transphobes and unquestioning cis laypeople alike, cited as proof that being trans was a social contagion, in a very similar way to how they are now sharing that data from an American university where fewer students self-reported as non-binary in a survey, as if they aren't currently living under an administration that is actively persecuting trans and non-binary people and cracking down on universities in particular, or that trans people are exclusively non-binary, which is obviously not true, but debunking that study is a whole other video. Rapid onset gender dysphoria was publicised as a new and very real phenomenon by outlets such as The Globe, The Mail, and The National Post and The National Review in the US, and pretty much every newspaper in the piss-soaked island of Great Britain. The thing is, this term does not come from science. It actually has its origins on transphobic blogs, Fourth Wave Now, Transgender Trend, and Youth Trans Critical Professionals, all of which, in 2016, began using rapid onset gender dysphoria to explain, according to biologist and prolific trans writer Julia Serrano, the term was intended to explain some parents' observations that 1. Their children came out as transgender seemingly suddenly, often during puberty, and 2. Their children also had trans-identified peers and interacted with trans-themed social media. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for reluctant parents to presume that their child has adopted a trans identity as a result of undue influence from other children and/or outside sources. Hence the recurring accusations about transgender agendas, peer pressure, and trans identity supposedly being trendy. Rapid onset gender dysphoria takes this presumption one step further. It asserts that any gender dysphoria these adolescents experience represents an entirely new phenomenon that is wholly distinct from the gender dysphoria that transgender people have historically experienced. One of the strange things about this is that it rests on the idea that trans people coming out in their youth was previously unheard of. Which is bollocks, and we have the data to back that up. Transgender children are such a well-known phenomenon now that Asmongold is panicking about it, and the UK banned their healthcare to try and make them go away. Because famously, taking away people's healthcare and telling them they're not allowed to exist both works and is not wildly inhumane. And in fact, in 2011, the WPATH Standards of Care had a whole section about trans adolescents, and the DSM-5, published in 2013, explicitly talks about gender dysphoria in childhood and as a known and recorded phenomenon. And also personally, I had that. That was me, the trans kid, that was me. But it gets worse. To date, only one research study in rapid onset gender dysphoria has been published. It is authored by Lisa Littman and appeared in PLOS One a few days ago. It has since undergone revision/correction. There are numerous problems with this study, as Zinnia Jones and Bryn Tannehill detailed in their critiques in an earlier rendition of this same study, back when it appeared as a non-peer-reviewed poster in the Journal of Adolescent Health. For starters, This was not a study of the children themselves, but rather their parents, who were instructed to fill out a 90-question survey about the adolescent and young adult children. What's even more troubling is how the sample set of parents was selected. Recruitment information with a link to the survey was placed on 3 websites where parents and professionals had been observed to describe rapid onset of gender dysphoria: Forthwith Now, Transgender Trend, and Youth Trans Critical Professionals. In other words, this supposed study of rapid onset gender dysphoria is entirely based on the opinions of parents who frequent the very same 3 blogs that invented and vociferously promote the concept of rapid onset gender dysphoria. Frankly, this is the most blatant example of begging the question that I've ever seen in a research paper. The fact that Lippmann didn't even bother to post a link to the survey on any of the many other online groups for parents of trans kids, i.e. ones that do not push a rapid onset gender dysphoria agenda, and who thus might have had very different assessments of their adolescent trans kids, strongly suggests that she purposefully structured her study to confirm the former parents' assumptions, rather than objectively assess the state of their children. So, as you can tell, the standards of evidence on the anti-trans side are very different. Frankly, the most the transphobes have on their side at this point is a state-mandated transphobic propaganda that was the Cass Review, which I have a couple videos on that you can check out too, in which Dr. Hilary Cass, someone whose expertise is not at all to do with trans people, dismissed all evidence for outcomes for trans kids that wasn't double-blind. The thing is, doing double-blind studies, in this case, and in the case of all studies of this type, is against medical ethics. Therefore, every study that passed an ethics board and was deemed not horrifically unethical was thrown in the garbage, and what was left was a bunch of steaming turds that were only believable if you also believed trans people are inherently illogical and the human equivalent of the concept of a flat earth. Or if you're a government minister desperately trying to make the trans issue go away by throwing all trans people under a giant bus and hoping no one notices that you've essentially called for trans people to be wiped off the face of the planet. Or at least, your part of the planet. And the Cass report also is not a scientific paper. It is not peer-reviewed, and it is not science. So far, I'm not impressed. But I do come from science. I have a PhD in biology. I do respect the process. I believe in the weight of evidence. And if enough studies came out that actually demonstrated that being trans doesn't exist, I'd have to do some real soul searching. Because I am much better off for having transitioned. I would have felt the same way as a kid, because all trans adults were once trans kids. And the weight of evidence supporting trans people is so strong at this point that it would take years and hundreds of studies to truly overturn what we currently know about how gender-affirming care improves people's mental health outcomes where no other method does. And we've tried those other methods over and over again. It's just that Asmongold and other far-right dolts don't bother to read about it. They just react. They don't fucking read. But if that evidence did build up, I would change my mind. Because that's how science works. I'd be fascinated to see the explanation as to why all those studies were so mistaken for so long. What were they observing instead? What have I been doing? It'd be a revolution in science that something went so unaccounted for decades, even when there were rabid transphobes over and over again desperately trying to find something, anything to debunk it. I mean, they're just incompetent if that's true. But I'm not a flat earther, so I would change my mind. It would lead to some really fascinating questions. I'd still live like this though, because I'm happy like this, so I don't know how we resolve that, but that's a question for the hypothetical future, which I firmly believe, because of my science background, will never come. I guess I'd be some weird new thing? This is entirely hypothetical. It's the equivalent of trying to imagine a world where we find out evolution was wrong this whole time. Wait, wasn't that one of the things that Asmongold was comparing trans people existing to? Huh. It's almost as if he's got it entirely backwards. It's almost as if he's acting like a young Earth creationist. Speaking of which...
You say, I mean, if a bird died at the roadside, you wouldn't just see it slowly be buried, it disappears. So how do they reconcile
They don't,
this?
they can't. Okay. And there are some geologists just quietly have admitted the problem, but it's not shouted from the rooftops, is it?
No.
Believing the Earth is 6,000 years old isn't just a conspiracy theory thing. It requires you to basically be an evangelical Christian. Asmongold is, because of his views, a fellow traveller with evangelical Christianity, at least in the way it expresses itself among American white evangelicals. These people hate trans people, for the most part. This comparison is incredibly silly. The kind of arguments people make for young Earth creationism are things like that dinosaurs were placed in the ground by Satan to tempt us into disbelieving the Bible, that every fossil was an animal drowned in the Great Flood that Noah for some reason chose not to save, and that every aging method from carbon dating to dendrochronology to everything is wrong. But most importantly, to believe in young Earth creationism, you have to put science away completely as a method of determining truth, and instead look to a literal interpretation of whatever translation of the Christian Bible you're working from. What about that is at all comparable to trans people? Trans healthcare exists due to medical science. We are taking it on the basis of science and on recommendation from scientists. It was tested and proved efficacious by medical science. Trans health, both physical and mental, is now, and has historically been, assessed by medical and psychological sciences and found to be the most effective treatment for what we refer to as gender dysphoria. And Asmongold should know this because he noted before, in one of his previously horrible moments, that the Nazis burned evidence of the science of transition.
The Nazis burned books on gender sciences.
They did do that.
First. Now the administration has villainized and marginalized migrant workers, trans...
It's a bit of a miss. Like, my understanding is that they burned them not because it was gender stuff, but because it was written in Jewish and not German.
People tried conversion therapy. It made people want to die. People tried giving hormone therapy that matched our sexes assigned at birth. It is rightly now considered torture. It did not work. There is a reason that gender-affirming care is more popular now than ever before. And that's because it's been proven to work by science, and the accumulation of evidence is only getting stronger and stronger. To deny this, and to instead insert your own beliefs about what trans people and trans kids really are, is to be the equivalent of the young Earth creationist in this discussion. You deny the body of scientific evidence and the scientific method itself, and replace it with your own, as Asmongold calls it, logic. His logic being straight-up science denial in favour of just saying, oh yeah, no, that doesn't exist. It makes no sense. This is an argument I find eerily similar to arguments against evolution that you see often from young Earth creationists. Evolution is too complicated. How could that even work? How would an eye just appear like that? It's too complicated. The design's got so much elements to it. It makes no sense. It's not logical. Just calling something logical without actually looking into the evidence is the same argument as it's just common sense. It's not an argument. It's just you saying, I don't see how that would work. Therefore, it's impossible. I'm sorry, but we have a higher standard of evidence for determining truth than that. You need actual evidence. And to be honest, given Asmongold's politics and his propensity for dismissing boatloads of evidence in favour of the logic of some tweet he just read with no evidence backing it up, I'm frankly surprised he even brought up the idea that the world is run by lizard people in disguise as something that's inherently ridiculous. It's exactly the sort of thing I could see him believing in. Some of the people he admires believe in it. And it is a far-right argument that I'm sure some members of his audience have sympathies towards, especially given Asmongold's comments about what happened in World War II.
I'm not one of these deniers. I think the probably happened. I think probably 99% certainty it happened.
According to the US talk show host Alex Jones, it's perfectly okay for the former sportscaster turned son of God David Icke to be a conspiracy theorist who believes that the world is ruled by a secret shadowy elite of global power brokers called the Illuminati, but it's considerably less okay to be a conspiracy theorist who believes that the world is ruled by a secret shadowy elite of 12-foot lizards who feast on human blood. Indeed, because of this, Jones considers Icke to be like a turd in a punch bowl. Icke, less turdy than blokey in his bloussons and slip-ons, may look like the Alan Partridge of conspiracy theorists, but his books about the reptilian New World Order actually sell, while his lectures, slides plus tunes by Boyzone, attract huge audiences and punch bowls across North America. But does he really believe this stuff? He's either a smart, opportunistic con man, or he's completely insane, or he's working for them directly, says Jones. That would be them, who are indeed a secret shadowy elite of global power brokers, just not lizards. Do keep up. David Icke is an internationally famous conspiracy theorist, one of the few considered too batshit for the Trump administration and their flavour of Hitlerite-adjacent truth twisters. Born in Leicester, which explains a lot frankly, a former footballer and commentator, Icke is most famous for his belief in an international New World Order conspiracy run by lizard people disguised as humans, what he calls reptilian shapeshifters, the Babylonian Brotherhood, the Illuminati, or the Elite, who work for an even more reptilian, interdimensional race of alien lizards called the Archons or the Anunnaki. Or should that be... David Icke is a raging anti-Semite and racist. Author John Ronson believes, after following Icke for a while, trying to figure out if he actually does mean the Jews when he says reptilian humanoids, as many people think, that David Icke literally believes they are reptiles. As much as I love John Ronson's work, and I mean that I'm a massive fan, I think he's a little too optimistic. The rhetoric he spews, the conspiracies, the fucking endorsement of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which he says reveals the conspiracy, and his argument that denial can be taught in schools, well, it paints a picture of an incredibly explicit anti-Semite, and an extreme one at that. Like the far, far end of how bad that bigotry can get. He is perhaps most famous, besides this whole conspiracy theory mongering, for coming out in 1991 as the Son of God. Sorry, Son of the Godhead, which he did on the BBC show Wogan, hosted by the late Terry Wogan. This is the man who made the lizard people conspiracy theory famous.
It's quite funny, really. You know, 2,000 years ago, had a guy called Jesus sat here and said these same things, you would still be laughing. It's really funny that we've not really moved on that much.
They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
The lizard people conspiracy theory is, in my opinion, and I can't quite believe this is still disputed, to be honest, a vile anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that posits that Jewish people are plotting to take over the world and enslave the rest of humanity. DNA obviously shares with the protocols of the Elders of Zion, the Blood Libel, the Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy theories of the Third Reich, and the ideology of Hitler in specific, who spread all three of these. Comparing believing in this to believing trans people exist is completely beyond the pale. It's horrifying, it's disgusting, and it should get you, frankly, ostracized from society. Trans people exist. Me living as I am is in no way equivalent to believing in the politics of Adolf Hitler. And even if you took the John Ronson argument that David Icke is just genuinely batshit and actually means lizard people when he says lizard people, how is the fact of my existence, or the belief backed up by mountains of evidence in other trans people being who they say they are, and not being lying, deceitful predators, the equivalent of believing that interdimensional space lizards are disguised as every celebrity and world leader and trying to run the world? Again, this conspiracy theory of a secret plot by deceitful actors to make everyone believe that they are someone they are not is literally what people like Asmongold and his heroes think trans people are. Everything this man says is projection. He is the conspiracy theorist. He thinks trans people are like the lizard people in the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, as do many high-profile transphobes. He thinks we are sinister, malicious predators and creeps, disguising ourselves as women to trick people, or that we are predating on children, forcing them to change their bodies, to manufacture consent for us, to trick the world into believing that we are our disguise. In this way, Asmongold and David Icke are not so different. And that's without even getting into the way he's talked about the which does suggest that he has similar opinions about Jewish people, or at least isn't immediately disgusted by these opinions. Believe it or not, we're not even done with this horrific anti-Semitic conspiracy theory on this channel, because this video spawned another video, because we now have one of the most notorious right-wing firebrands in the USA genuinely promoting this conspiracy theory. See you next week to see what Candace Owens has to say about this.
And I'm pretty sure they're hybrid. You know what I mean? Like, they just look like an Apple software that I should be able to download at night, you know? Like my phone's getting an update or something. It's something in the eyes. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I know I'm human, but I don't know if I stabbed you if you bleed, you know? I'm not going to stab them.
Unlike the lizard people conspiracy theories, Asmongold is not opposed to violence against minorities. In fact, he's been advocating for it more often, if anything, particularly towards immigrants. I wonder if he's familiar with his fellow travellers who believe in this conspiracy he compares to believing trans people are real, and how they use similar rhetoric to him in this regard. And in fact, David Icke's growing popularity after he declared himself the Son of God was very worrying. It turns out people who peddle in conspiracy theories and bigotry disguised as uncovering the truth can get very popular with certain segments of the public. David Icke once, in Jon Ronson's words, lectured to packed houses all over the world, riveting his audiences for 6 hours at a time with extraordinary revelations. Indeed, in terms of the size of his following, he was the most influential racist on the lecture circuit. And if everything he believes in and advocates for is the same as what someone who truly believes that it is Jewish people and not lizards he is talking about, if he is doing the damage of someone ranting against Jewish people with the plausible deniability that he is indeed talking about lizards, does that not in the end have the same effect? The same impact? A certain Twitch streamer does stream for hours at a time advocating for far-right policies and action, even if he believes he is not a conspiracy theorist and is only being logical. If he is using the rhetoric of conspiracy theories to spread hatred against trans people, immigrants, and Muslims, among other people, it doesn't matter if he genuinely believes he's not transphobic, that he's not far-right, that he's not a conspiracy theorist ranting like someone who believes in lizard people running the world, or that he doesn't use the same logic as young earth creationists, or that he isn't like a flat earther, denying the entirety of the established science because it doesn't fit the conspiratorial narrative of how the world works he claims that he logicked himself into. He demonstrably is those things. He demonstrably is doing those things. And he demonstrably is much more akin to a flat earther, a young earth creationist, and people who believe lizard people run the world, than anyone who accepts the scientific consensus that trans people exist, that there are trans kids who grow to be trans adults, that the best treatment for gender dysphoria is gender-affirming care, that trans people in sports are not demons trying to cheat, that trans women are not perverts in disguise. If you list all of the elements that underlie transphobia, all of the narratives they need to stack on top of each other to make it make sense, you will see very clearly that it relies on conspiratorial thinking. If you can convince yourself trans people are a global conspiracy to trick people into accepting that they are not the gender they are assigned at birth, to infiltrate schools, infiltrate hospitals, to steal sports medals, and to sneak into toilets to ambush unsuspecting women, you already are the kind of person who could be convinced of a flat earth. You've made the same number of batshit logical leaps, and swallowed so many nonsense conspiracy theories, many of which contradict each other, and are all, to a one, cynical, and not backed up by evidence. So, how am I then the equivalent of a flat earther? I can see the horizon. I see ships pass over it, and I know they're not tumbling over the edge. What about you? When you go around saying Palestinians are an inferior culture that deserve to be when you say there's a chance the might not have happened, when you say that trans people were only persecuted by the Nazis because our science was written in Jewish, do you truly believe that you have the prerequisite knowledge, critical thinking skills, and objectivity to deem an entire group of people equivalent to flat earthers? If you never leave your filthy, cockroach-infested house, I'm surprised you even believe there's more than one street on the planet, never mind that the Earth is round. For all the rest of you, observe the movements of the Earth around the Sun, revel in the oblate spheroid that is our Earth, and never, for the love of fucking God, watch or listen to Asmongold. Until next time, thanks for watching. Hey, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you liked it, give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe, share it with all your friends, and tell everyone about it. and help me out if you can. It's coming up to autumn when my birthday is. It's in October, so I'm pushing to get my Bridget Empire out of her overdraft before her birthday initiative. That didn't make grammatical sense, but you get it, which will inevitably probably extend to the Get Bridget Empire out of her overdraft before Christmas initiative. So if you want to help with this and get me debt-free before 34, you can give me one-time donations on Coffee or PayPal, links below. You can go to my fourth wall page, which has some shirts on it now, if you like a shirt. It's got a Daily Telegraph on it. I'll put some on screen now. And if I didn't, it means that I forgot to do that. So hopefully I didn't forget to do that. Also, help me out if you can. 'Tis the season, and by season I mean my birthday. And also I'm going through some pretty bad personal stuff, which is making me very sad and means I might need a big lump of money in the future. So if you can help me gather that lump of money, I'd really help, as well as they get out of the overdraft thing. So just in general, things might be looking pretty dire for a little bit, but yeah, if you can't help, don't feel bad about that. But if you can, do. Or the best way to do that is to sign up to my Patreon or YouTube memberships, where you can do the best thing that you want me to do. You can be my best friend, and by best friend I mean my patron. You can get early videos, access to the Zoom Discord, my Nintendo Switch friend code, and exclusive content that's just long-form interviews. And also, you get your name read out at the end of each video, just like these lovely people. Buried Elk, Ewan Bennett, Bags, Malcolm, Gina Service, You Are Made of Stupid, Tomo, Melissa Jackson, Ren Approves Your Stuff, Minstrel of course, Emma Not Emma, Jeffreyon, Tom the Not Quite So Brave as Sir, Lancelot, LFR, Tricoi, Proquar, Ariella, Robin Thomas, Kathy 1410 Itchu, Justice for My Boy Gandalf, Gull Escape, Kira B, No Sparking Heart, Corey, Gianna J, Mighted in the Sword, Carolyn, Imogen Q, Luciana Frias Andrade, Adam, Harry, Endog191, Cav, Quesadilla de Tortilla, Azul, Leron, Adam Lees, Daniel Nevels, no not that Paul, MB, Wandering Wonder, Lex Phoenix, Enter Kurzitz, Mira D, J Senior, Boa Ear, James W, Marvin Dorr, Foreign Guild, Deborah Laboon, Zilla Athenian, Vince Whitaker, Amelia Lassette, Jason Haig, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helena Real, Sierra Whiskey, Ali Catgill, John N, Lloyd Luciente, Jason Cribbett, Shield Bait, and Robin Podolsky, Nightlife, Plushy Jesus, Casual Observer, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Phil Brogger, Soa Piglet, Brain Douche, Artie Wolf, Greg Noble, Dan McMillan, Karen Regalado, Alexandria Lilly, PJ Lisbroll, Howard Lott, Neronius Guardian, and Jade Luciferian, Taraxis Builds Things, and Sarah Francesca Smith. Thank you all so much. Have a great day and a great life, and yeah, check in on your people, because sometimes things are hard and they need a hug. I need a hug.